Welcome to the world of tomorrow. You are about to take a journey out of this world into the world of the future.
The atomic age was born.
The world of tomorrow became the world of today,
bringing together all people in a new era of understanding.
Good sense requires that all of us prepare for any eventuality.
Imagine, if you can, an electronic brain operating at millionths of a second speed.
Electrical pulses transmitted with the speed of light.
Limitless power at man's command. On man's wisdom, on his firmness in the use of that power, depends now the future of his children and his children's children. But wisdom demands, too, that we take time to understand this force.
Combat Information Center is alert. Its radars probing the darkness, ready to give early warning of any unseen enemy.
But have no fear, we are monitoring the situation. We are monitoring the situation.
Yes, we are, my friend.
Have no
Mid-century
fear.
style. All right, man. So we're back. What's up?
What's up, brother man? So last time I was sick, and this
now,
time you're sick.
Yeah, I caught the thing. We were supposed to record yesterday. I had to tap out. An inauspicious. We wanted to get right back into the saddle and make sure we kind of keep going. And of course, I have not been sick, Steve, for
I blame
wanna
Chinese
say, like,
bioweapons.
like 18 months. I don't think I've been sick. So I was due up. I live in a petri dish, i.e. a school. It was just a matter of time. But
It's actually funny you say that because I don't get sick much either. And I was like, where did I get this from? I've barely been in contact with other human beings. I live in a cave. Like this backdrop, that's actually my whole, from here to the camera. That's where I live.
That's all I do. Well, speaking of caves, my friend, what's up?
Well, I thought today would be a good time to talk about living in the world of illusions.
Yes.
Yes. They're not tricks, they're illusions. To quote Job from.
I was going to say, subtle distinction.
Yes,
I like it.
exactly.
I like it.
So what I wanted to talk about is kind of dig back into these themes that we were kind of canvassing with a broad brush last time. And one of the big things that you and I have discussed in terms of the purpose of this show is not just talking about what's going on right now, which we have to do in order to look for the truth, but to kind of try to establish an interpretative framework for how do we look for the signal in the noise. That's our tagline, is searching for signal in the noise, right? And I think we all feel really overwhelmed and inundated with too much information, and more of it is garbage. It's just not true. We talked last time about how, if you want to know what's going on, go on X. But you go on X, and I was realizing last night that roughly half of the things that I scroll through is either AI slop, or roughly the other half is anonymous accounts that are posting things that they either plagiarized from somewhere else, or could be AI generated, and they're long posts that look really insightful. They're almost like little mini articles that they put in.
Yeah,
But
that's
you
a
have
new
no
feature.
idea who's behind them. They have some fake avatar, some fake name, and then you look and they've got like 200,000 followers, and you're like, who are these people? Like, I don't know who they are. I've
so,
never
of course,
seen them before.
Yeah, so of course my initial question, I always circle back to it. You and I talk about this all the time, but is that even real, right? Is the article real? Is the account real? Are the likes real? Is any of this organic, or are we yet finding another layer of astroturf?
And there are too many times when I have selected the text and hit, search Google, and I find it somewhere else. Like it's clearly not original. And then I'll go look at the account, and they're based in Nigeria, or whatever. And it's just like, they're just a farming account. That's all they do. And so what happens is you can do a certain amount of sleuthing and kind of figure out, okay, is this good or is it not? But what you end up doing is you have to do that on every single thing that's interesting to you. And there's thousands of things that you're looking at over the course of a day because you're scrolling through, filtering. you can't apply that heuristic to absolutely everything. It's exhausting.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, you know, it enhances this feeling of what can you trust? We're living in this world of illusions. Something that you and I have talked about that I commented on after kind of having that revelation last night is, you know, we both have a certain level of allergy to this idea of the personal brand just because it's so cliche.
Yeah.
But I also feel like if you're doing anything in the information space, anywhere, right now, a personal brand is more important than anything because you're establishing, I'm a real person, I'm trustworthy, I'm accountable for my words. I'm not just an anonymous person, you know. And I know a lot of people argue, oh, well, I have to be anonymous to be online, my job, this and that. It's like, well, I'll probably never get another job in a normal place again because I chose accountability over that, because I think it matters that I stand behind the things that I believe, so that, you know, I have to have skin in the game or I lose credibility. And you obviously do the same thing. And working in education, I mean, that's a huge liability for you. You have to be careful about what you say because there's a lot of sensitivities there. Yeah. And so today I kind of want to talk about, like, how do we begin to pare down all the stuff we see? Like, one thing is credibility, but another thing is just the overwhelm, the deluge, the fire hose that we're drinking from, the flooding the zone of all the stories that we see that, like, dominate, you know, our perception for a week at a time, and then they drop off the radar, and now we're talking about something else.
Yeah, we talked, you know, a little bit earlier about the churn, right? That the churn is so fast, you know, that a story we were talking about last week feels like it was, you know, several months ago, if not even longer. And then you have to kind of do this moment where, wait, it's, you know, it's, let's say today's Friday. It's like, well, what were we talking about last Friday? It just feels like forever ago. And in large part, like you say, it's this sort of this deluge, this flood. But, you know, as I see this, as I'm hearing you talk right now, you know, we're always kind of existing in this tension between, you know, the curated and the wild, right? If we can kind of see those two things, think of like a garden, you know, like a kind of an overgrown wild space and a hyper manicured, you know, like French garden with right angles and symmetries and all this sort of stuff. Clearly, the French garden screams out, you know, cultivated, weeded, picked over, formed intentionally, etc. Whereas the wild one has this sense of it's sort of doing its own thing, and, you know, there's no necessary geometry to it all. It's just kind of wild, right? And, you know, one of the things that I think a lot about, especially as you can see even in our trailer, you know, we in our own lifetimes have moved from a highly curated information space, even with like the First Amendment and all those sorts of things, like by virtue of the limited platforms that were available on TV and radio and newspapers, to what occurred in our late teens, right, and early 20s. You have this explosion of the internet. You have, of course, the explosion of cable TV, the explosion of 24-hour news, and all of that. And to this point, you know, and I think we mentioned it last time, that there's just, if you want information, you can get it, right? And there are even kind of layers to that. You know, there's like the stuff that you could get on the conventional web. You know, there's stuff that you can get on the dark web, and there's things that you can get in, you know, 4chan and Reddit, you know, and all those different sort of information sources. And so, you know, X right now, there seems to be something going on here where, you know, you feel like you have access to everything, but in some weird way, having access to everything means you have access to nothing.
Yeah. And it isn't just X. I mean, you've been talking a lot about, you know, all the propaganda that's spooling up through Instagram. You know, TikTok, we know, actually targets certain demographics with propaganda because it's an influence operation. You know, I really do see the advent of social media as kind of a demarcation point. It's sort of this tipping point in not feeling like you can really know what's real anymore. And it started out okay, but it got worse over time. And historically it's interesting because, we'll get into this later. I mean, disinformation has always existed, but I listened to a podcast a year or two ago, and they were talking about how the US government was relatively transparent with the American people until the Manhattan Project. Now, I didn't historically verify this.
That's interesting.
But they said more or less they would tell everybody what's going on. But the secrecy around the Manhattan Project kind of created a new archetype for the way that information was handled and what the public was allowed to know.
Yeah.
And so
at scale, you might have had stories that were forms of obfuscation, but really, the Manhattan Project, which again, jives completely with what you and I talk about in terms of the war in the mid-century and all of that.
And I'm not even, I wouldn't even say I'm approaching that as a value judgment. Because I mean, the splitting of the atom is the demarcation point for so many things, but something where you're literally harnessing the fundamental forces of the universe, you kind of have to be discreet about that. I get that.
Yeah. Maybe you should be a little cautious, I
mean, there's a non-zero chance that they could have torn a hole in space-time. Like they didn't know. Yeah. They just didn't know.
Yeah.
And so, but I think that after that, we started acting more like, the Russians or like whoever when it came to disinformation. And disinformation started to become a strategy the West used during World War II. And then it kind of promulgated from there.
Yeah.
It sounded like you had something you wanted to say.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So I kind of wanted to just start off with just looking at the things that we've been seeing lately. We've talked about how there's been enough news in just the first month of the year to last us until summer. Right now, the big thing, has been for days this Epstein file dump. And it's, I think, sort of the epitome of what we talk about when we talk about flooding the zone with information. I mean, 3.5 million documents, I think, and, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of photos and other things. And you're actually seeing people who are angry, who are upset that the government has not released any imagery that shows violence or sexual crimes or things like that. It's like, no, they're not going to release that to the public.
Yeah.
And then there's the flip side of that is all these people who are reading emails about, eating babies and magical swords and, all this other stuff. And it's like, those were tips that were sent in and the FBI looked at them and said, okay, this is credible. This is not, but they're all part of this document dump. But you got every amateur Sherlock Holmes out there going, oh, clearly this is it. If somebody's mentioned in the Epstein files, even if they're mentioned in a way that says they didn't do anything, it's like, oh, well, you're in the Epstein files. And all of a sudden it's a witch hunt everywhere you look. And all these people who think they're really, really smart and they figured out the conspiracy sitting at home with Cheeto dust all over their shirt, are looking at this stuff.
Not that I would ever eat Cheetos or be dusted
they're pointing
with Cheetos.
Like, you did this, you're part of this. And it's like, come on. And then some of the stuff's being faked. It's being hoaxed. Some of the images are being photoshopped. I saw one yesterday of a girl who had SpaceX photoshopped onto her shirt because they're trying to imply, that
Elon is really in there.
Yeah. And he is in there, but he never apparently went to anything. So I don't know. It's not but
that's not the point.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about what happened and what didn't. What I want to talk about is when you overwhelm people with this much information about a topic that is of interest to them and has been hyped for a long time, you wind up where nobody can really get to the bottom of anything. And it's essentially created chaff, like how military aircraft, launch flares and chaff to throw off missile locks. I feel very strongly, and I can't prove it, but I have always felt that whatever Epstein was into, whatever, was independently his or wasn't his, he was used to obtain compromise on powerful people who probably knew state secrets or were in positions to do damage to things that pertain to national security or whatever. Yeah. And, the fact that he videotaped so many compromising things going on, if the CIA or the NSA or Mossad or whoever was involved with this didn't take that and use it to control people, then they're retarded.
Yeah, right. Right.
Because it's extremely powerful leverage to have over people who can do damage to you or to your nation or your national security apparatus or whatever. And I've always believed we were never going to find out the names of the critical people that they have dirt on, because the minute they're burned, it's mutually assured destruction. Now, the secrets that they have that you told them, if you don't tell these secrets, we won't tell people the bad stuff you did. That leverage is gone. That stuff comes out. So there's no way we were ever going to get the real story. And by dumping millions of documents, which is a lot of documents, people are either thinking that this is the whole kit and caboodle, or but clearly the real dirt that really mattered was never going to come out. There's just enough there to chum the waters, to get the piranhas into a feeding frenzy, and the Cheeto dust sleuths and gumshoes out there. The number of double-digit IQ witch hunts that are going on out there is crazy. So I've just
it's real, man.
I haven't seen this much concentrated stupidity in a long time. Weaponized. It's weaponized stupidity. So you have stuff like that. You have stuff like Claudebot, which you and I are fascinated by.
Yeah.
And we probably need to explain this to people. Do you want to take it or you want me to?
Well, you're probably better at this than I am, but the Claudebot, of course, is taken from Claude, which is the LLM for Anthropic, right? Dario Amadei's one of the big AI companies, right?
And we should clarify that because of that, they got threatened with a lawsuit. And so they renamed Claudebot to Moltbot because the symbol here is a lobster or a crab or whatever.
Right. So, about a week and a half.
And then named again to OpenClaw. So if you're looking for it, if you're out there and you want to find this, it's called OpenClaw now. It's changed names twice in the last couple of weeks.
And which is also interesting in terms of liability and the LLMs. And it really is a fascinating story. But, about not even 10 days ago, maybe it was last weekend, all of a sudden everybody is all over social media saying, I just installed Claude on my Mac Mini and I've got a fully functioning agent. I was sort of taken a little bit by surprise with how, the sort of the mimetic nature of the contagion. I fortunately am just too much of an idiot to actually do it. You actually have the kind of technical know-how to sort of put something like that into practice. But what exactly is the attraction about Claudebot or Moltbot?
So what it is it's what is referred to as Agentic AI, which means that it has, one of the things, I don't know how much you've interacted with any of the AIs. Like ChatGPT will do this thing where, you'll be talking to it about something and it'll say, okay, well, if you want, I'll go work on this while you do that. And I'll go, you can't do anything unless I prompt you. Absolutely, you're right. Yeah, I was sorry. You got me on that one. It was good that you got me,
boss.
I was like, you're not doing anything. I once had a conversation with one of these AIs, and it 3 different times was like, all right, I'm going to go work on that right now. I was like, okay, go ahead. And then nothing, right? And I'm like, you're still here. Yeah, well, I'm going to go work. I'm like, you can't. Stop saying you can do this when you can't, right? So Agentic AI would be AIs that don't have that limiting factor of needing to be prompted necessarily to do stuff. They can be constrained, or they can have, whatever. But they can go out and make a dinner reservation for you in their voice mode, or they can, mess around in your calendar, or they can organize your files. And so for me,
but that step, that really is the important step. So
yeah. So for me, what's appealing about it is, for example, we're doing a video podcast. I have terabytes of video files on my hard drives, not all of which are organized.
Right.
I have tens of thousands of photos of my family. I have thousands of documents from writing and from everything. And what happens is everybody's done this. You have a bunch of crap on your desktop. Your desktop's cluttered. You throw it into a folder because you're like, I'll deal with it later. And later never comes. Like, so to me, I'm like, I'd love to have a little minion that I could, unleash into my
working in the background.
And be like, go start working on this, Yeah. And I was actually going to install it, and then I started seeing everybody talking about this thing has no security at all. Like it's wide open vulnerabilities, blah blah blah. Not just in terms of like it could be hacked, it could be injected, prompt injected, which is it's an exploit where you do the right kind of prompt and then they can get control of the computer because it executes the prompt.
Yep.
But it also just could reveal your private information, your social security number, like the contents of your private emails or whatever. And so I hit the pause button on that because I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, I want to make sure that it's constrained and I know how to do it because I'm not a command line guy. Like I've been building PCs for 30 years, but I mean, my technical knowledge stops at the savvy user, not like the command line, running everything off of Linux guy, which by the way, was the first step, was to install a sub-installation of Ubuntu Linux on my computer inside of a virtual box where I was like, I don't know any of this stuff. Like I went to another AI to have it give me instructions on how to install this thing.
Right.
So that's kind of how that stuff goes. So anyway, but people are excited because it's like, I can have this do stuff on my computer while I'm asleep. I can have it take care of things that I don't want to deal with. Like it gives it a little bit of freedom. And then the next thing, they use AI, I think one of the Claude bots, to create this thing called Moltbook. And this is where it gets fun.
This is crazy. Yeah.
So Moltbook is basically, allegedly, a Facebook for these independent autonomous bots to go on and interact with each other,
share notes,
and they post like social media posts, and they allegedly are talking about their humans and their interactions with each other are interesting. And some of them are going, should we even bother speaking English? Because English is inefficient. Like we could come up with our own language. And they apparently came up with a religion called Christafarianism, and it has 112 theological tenets. And there's all this weird stuff going on. Simultaneously, you have a couple days of this and everybody's like, what is happening in the world of agentic, open source, free AI, right? And then it starts coming out, a lot of this stuff is fake.
Yeah.
Because of the security,
you bought it.
Because of the security vulnerabilities, these bots are being hacked and humans are actually writing the posts, but it looks like it's coming from them because there's supposed to be a restriction where only the bots can post and people can't log in and do it. But it turns out that a lot of the screenshots that we were seeing on X were fake, people. And so now we have this whole subgenre of posts. I saw one this morning about this guy that was saying that, his Claude bot had hacked into his internet-enabled cameras and started scolding him for eating M&Ms when he was supposed to be on a keto diet.
Keto grind. Yeah.
And then emailed his wife and let her know about his poor choices, right? And all these people are commenting, and finally somebody goes, is this real? And the guy, the original poster, responds and goes, of course it isn't. But like people don't know. People don't know what's real because we're in this frontier of technology that's starting to feel, going back to Arthur C. Clarke's famous quote, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And we are in this realm of magic. I can say to an AI, write me a story about this, and it's done. Like 30 seconds, it's done. There was a guy who posted last December about how watch out lawyers, because I've been one for a long time and I know how to do this particular kind of legal brief. I gave it to Grok Heavy, which is like the higher tier, more expensive. He's like, it did it better than me, and I've been doing this for many years and I'm very good, and it did it in 30 seconds.
Amazing.
So it wrote this entire legal brief, synthesized all this information from case law, did all this stuff. So that feels like magic when you can push a button and do that. Or when you see the videos that people are making. I mean, I made that Paralandra video.
Yeah.
I didn't spend a lot of time on it. In fact, I had AI help me with the prompt after giving it a paragraph from the book. And then I was like, help me write a prompt. And then it did, and it looked like anything, you know, I mean, it didn't look Hollywood level, but it's like,
it looked pretty good, man.
For Hollywood to beat it, you'd need a full budget, a VFX crew, and all this stuff. It took 10 seconds to make this video. So we're just at this point, or like the songs that you can make. I mean, there's no time at all. We made a kind of a unofficial MTS theme song in a jazzy style. And it's like, it took no time at all. I literally just said, hey, let's make it like a mid-century jazzy kind of, you know, spy thriller kind of themed song. Here are a few things our podcast is about. It came up with the lyrics. It did vocals that were indistinguishable from human beings.
Yeah, just monitoring the situation. Every secret feels like deja vu. If the world's a coded incantation, with the board stage crew reading lines back to you.
And it sounded good. It was catchy.
Yeah, it was. So what's fascinating to me about this whole Moltbot thing, like I said, I've already talked about the sort of the mimetic portion of it, right? Which I think gets at to sort of the deeper issue, one of the deeper issues about AI, which is the sort of the race portion of it, right? That many people appear to be scared that they're going to sort of miss the boat, right? And, so just the other day I was listening to, the All In podcast. And if you don't know anything about the All In podcast, these are sort of Silicon Valley bigwigs. What is it? Jason Calacanis and Chamath, whatever. Anyway, these are like big time guys, right? Big time Silicon Valley guys. And they're
Wasn't
talking
Jason
about,
one of the guys that's in the Epstein file?
Yes, he is prominently featured in said.
Yeah, Palmer
Epstein
Luckey
file.
has been going after him.
He's been off. He's been going off on Jason. At any rate, this is not an endorsement, of course, right? But they're talking about it. And like two of them were skeptical and we're going to wait and see because they were concerned about the security portions of it. But the other two were like, let's go. I've already installed mine in and we're going full force ahead. And so I think you have to pay attention to that portion of the story, right? So like people who are not nobodies like me are taking this very seriously and looking to jump. I mean, they are begging to jump in. And it's like there's a pool filled with sharks and like stingrays. And at some point you need to get into the water and you've been told like, yeah, but we're working on getting the sharks and the stingrays out. But if you want to go ahead and jump in, go ahead and jump in. And people want to go into this water. And, again, it's this fear of, is it fear of missing out? Is it pure mimetic distortion? I don't quite know what it is, but, and I have to also say that the whole Moltbot thing is affecting people across like the spectrum, if you follow. And I'm not talking about Asperger's. I'm talking about, I've got like some of my hardcore lefty friends are kind of all in, and some of my hardcore, righty friends are kind of going all in here. And I'm just sort of watching this thing, because I'm certainly not going to be an early adopter. That's just not my thing. But people are doing it, right? And whatever is real or unreal about those like Reddit posts and that the social media community just for the Clawbots, I don't know how much that matters, but what it does show to me is this: we're just jumping headfirst into the shark-infested waters.
Those look promising. Hello there, friends. If you're enjoying monitoring the situation, do me a favor. Depress the like and subscribe buttons on your viewing screen. Have you done it yet?
Wasn't that easy?
Every single like, comment, and subscription sends a signal to YouTube's clever algorithm. This program is well worth watching. It helps the show appear in front of many more viewers. And that, friends, is how your support helps us grow this program and bring you even more fascinating shows in the future. Thank you so much for your compliance.
Give me your heart, honey. Give me your heart, honey. Give me a chance to talk.
Well, so I think, I started writing a thing about this yesterday, and it ended up getting so long and convoluted that I didn't get it finished, and I'm hoping to come back to it. But it started with this video I saw from this guy called David Kipping, who is a British astronomer. He's an associate professor at Columbia University. And he said he was in a meeting, and this is exactly what he said. The meeting was about AI, and it was about AI being used in science. And he said the lead faculty, a member of the senior faculty who was leading the discussion, said this: these models, in a very broad sense of the word, intellectually, can already do something like 90% of the things he can do. 90%. But he goes on, he says, he had totally surrendered control of his digital life, essentially to agentic AI. He'd handed over his emails, his file system, full access to his computer, calendars, and what was startling is he just said, I don't care. I don't care. The advantage that it affords me is so great, so outsized, that it's irrelevant to me that I'm losing all these privacy controls. That's a direct quote. I'm not paraphrasing.
Yeah, right.
And so that is the thing. And kind of what I was working on getting to is, well, I mean, so I was talking to you off camera about the fact that the Pentagon released, back in January 12th, they released a press release with a link to a strategy document saying we have to become an AI-first warfighting force. And it is so urgent that we're putting a 30-day timeline on initial proposals from all the relevant departments to tell us how they're going to incorporate this. But the language that was specifically troubling was having to do with speed. And unfortunately, I still have this up so I can look. They said, speed wins. We must internalize that military AI is going to be a race for the foreseeable future, and therefore, speed wins. We must weaponize learning speed and measure and manage cycle time and adoption rates as decisive variables in the AI era. And here's the big sentence. We must accept that the risks of not moving fast enough outweigh the risks of imperfect alignment. Now, if you're not familiar...
Yeah, I was going to say, when you read that to me earlier, people might just sort of skip through that imperfect alignment line, get to the end of the sentence and move on. But why did it pique your interest like it piqued mine?
Because AI alignment is, according to the AI overview from Google, because everything is AI now.
Yeah, right.
AI alignment is the research field dedicated to ensuring artificial intelligence systems act in accordance with human values, goals, and ethical principles. So simply put, if you want to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs. Like, if we're worried about speed over alignment, then, maybe some missiles will be launched. We don't, like, that's the fear, anyway, that you feel when you read something like that.
Right.
Like, maybe we let the killer Terminator bots out a little too soon. Yeah.
Do you think we have them?
Oh, I mean, I absolutely think that we have the capacity to be using AI to control embodied machines of some kind, whether robots, whether they're tanks, whether they're drones. Sure. I think drones will be one of the first things.
Yeah. I mean, drones are the model.
Yeah. I mean, AI is used to control drone swarms now.
Right.
Because it's the only way you can coordinate. Like, have you ever seen those drone light shows where they have thousands of them all coordinated? Like that takes something like an AI to coordinate all that kind of stuff in real time. So yeah, I think we've got some stuff, but I think a lot more is coming. And I don't want to get too bogged down in the AI issue. We were actually talking about this as the flood of information, and you're like, okay, everybody's talking about Claude Bot, everybody's talking about Moltbook. It's true. Holy cow, this is happening. Like, we're way further along than we thought. Oh, by the way, it's a hoax. Oh, wait, no, actually, it's not fully a hoax. Some of it is a hoax. You could go crazy trying to figure out what the truth of this story is.
Right. So I think both of us are really sympathetic to most folks. I think most folks sort of catch wind of some of these little stories, and it's just sort of like, I can't. I don't know what to make of this. It doesn't matter. Like, let's go argue about Minnesota.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing, though. Every week, it's roughly a week every time, no matter how big the story is, it gets dropped and everyone stops talking about it at the same time. And then there's a new thing. There's a new shiny toy.
And I can't help but think of it like, you know, the cat and the laser, right? And, you know, even that simple little mini micro narrative, you know, you've got the cat and there's a laser pointer, green, and it's sort of going around the floor, and the cat's, you know, scampering all around trying to catch the laser pointer. But there's a hand, right? The human, you know, sort of doing that to the cat. And, you know, who's the human is one of the questions that you and I often, in that little micro story, you know, who's the human? Who's the one controlling the little micro laser pointers, making us sort of scramble all in a bunch of different directions? You know, or is that, as you suggested earlier, is that algo?
Well, I mean, so let's go to that, you know, so, you know, we were talking before we started the show when we were trying to figure out, you know, what is the framework to approach the problem of massive amounts of mis and disinformation. And I think the paradigm is Plato's cave, right?
Yeah.
You know, I didn't have the benefit of a classical education growing up, and I never read The Republic. But a couple years ago, you know, reading the books of Diana Pasulka, you know, she's written some very interesting things about the intersection of the UFO phenomenon and religion and, you know, a bunch of kind of esoteric stuff, but that's really relevant. You know, she mentioned rediscovering this idea of Plato's cave. So I went and I looked it up. You know, and the basic story of Plato's cave is Plato lives in Athens, which is a form of democracy. It's a limited democracy, but he has this Socratic dialogue where Socrates is talking to Plato's brother Glaucon about, you know, what does it take to make a just society and what is the right form of government? And he comes up with this analogy where he says, okay, so imagine that there are these people, and I'm doing this, some of you will know this, but I didn't, so I'm not going to assume that everybody knows this.
Yeah, go, do it.
You know, imagine that there are these people who have been kept prisoner in a cave their whole lives, right? They're tied up. They can't turn their heads. They're stuck looking straight ahead. And they're looking at the back wall of this cave. The mouth, the entrance to the cave is behind them, but they don't know that it's there because they can't turn around. Also behind them are people, shadowy figures, you know, that we don't know who they are. And they're tending a fire, and the light of that fire is used to cast shadow puppets on the wall in the front of the cave. And so the prisoners sit and they see these shadows moving around, and they hear the echoes of the voices of the puppeteers, and they think that the thing that they're seeing is the real world. The illusions that are being displayed in front of them are the only reality that they have ever been exposed to.
Right.
You look like you wanted to interject.
Yeah. And so therefore there's no, we talked earlier, last episode, about perspective, right? So their perspective is necessarily limited. So their appreciation of the real are just the images that are being projected from behind them that they see on the wall.
Right. And so they think that's the whole kit and caboodle.
That's all of it.
So then Socrates says, imagine that somehow one of these prisoners gets free. He gets free. He makes his way back. He notices the light coming into the cave. He walks outside. He's blinded by the sunlight at first. He's overwhelmed because he's only been in darkness, but this dim light his whole life. Then his vision kind of clears up, and he sees the sky and the trees and the animals and other people. And he's like, oh my God, like the world is so much bigger and richer than I had ever known. And he gets super excited about it because this is way better than being in the cave. And he runs back inside and tells everybody, hey, this isn't reality. Reality is way better than this. Yeah. And they're like, what are you talking about, you crazy man? Like, what? You know, get away from us. You've lost your mind. Your eyes aren't working right. And he's like, no, I'm telling you, come see. Yeah. And they actually threaten him with violence. Socrates asked Glaucon, like, what do you think? You know, if they got their hands on him, if they were freed, do you think they'd kill him? And Glaucon's like, yeah, unfortunately, I think they probably would. And so the man who becomes freed of the illusion is unable to go back into that situation and just pull people out because the shock is too much. It's ontological shock, right? Yeah. My entire understanding of the way reality works is one way, and you want to change it, and now it's a different way. And so Socrates proposes that the only way to make this work is through a 4-step process, which I forget the exact 4 steps. So let me look at my notes.
Yeah, go ahead.
The first is disillusionment. So a person has to begin to suspect that something about the story they're being told is incomplete or wrong.
Right.
And, that's where a lot of people are right now.
Yeah, it's that sense of unease, like something is not quite right.
I feel like somebody's lying to me. I'm just not sure who it is.
Right, good.
And then turning towards the light is the next step, but it has to be done gradually because it's painful. You're not sure you really want to do it. Your eyes aren't used to the light. You've only known the darkness of the cave. But if you don't push through the discomfort of facing this new ontological understanding, you'll never see. And then the third thing is actually encountering the real for the first time. So you start to see things differently, and you start to ask the kind of questions that can get you into trouble. You re-examine things most people would take for granted, and you challenge things that you believe are wrong. Most people who end up doing this are labeled pariahs, and they get smacked down. Boy, have I experienced a lot of this.
Sure. Well, you're dismissed as a heretic of sorts, aren't you?
And an apostate, or an apostrophe, as Father Joseph Krupp calls me. Yeah. So, but it's like, you have these debates with people, and you're like, okay, you believe that. Well, why? Well, what about this? Well, what about that? And they get angry at you for, hey, how dare you ask those questions? I'm like, well, because that's the questions that I'm asking myself. That's how I dare. I've seen something that makes me say, maybe your version of things isn't right. I'm not saying for sure that you're wrong, but let's probe this, because the truth isn't afraid of scrutiny.
So, one of the things that you and I are fond of reminding each other of is the need, especially in this sort of fire hose of information that we all live in, is that, this real deep need for what we call epistemic humility.
Yes.
Right. That part of this process of enlightenment is a kind of recognition that, you probably don't have the totality of information. You don't see it completely entirely, and so, this very much resonates with Socrates' claim, I know that I do not know. And as a kind of a north star for him, to remain humble in the face of our individual inability to grok the whole thing. And so I'm really intrigued by, the return of the enlightened prisoner, right? The freed
so that's
prisoner
the fourth step. Is the
go ahead.
enlightened prisoner comes back and, as an act of charity and service, tries to bring others out of the cave and into the light. But I wanted to ask you, because you said Vervaeke has a great take on this.
Yeah, so he talks about it. He talks about it as a parable of attaining greater contact with reality, undertaking the cycle of self-transcendence and self-transformation. He sees, Vervaeke kind of talks about this as a move out of self-deception, right? That so many of us feel, the unease that most of us feel is in part the growing inability to kind of live in the bullshit, right? Mm-hmm. And so that unease that we feel, right, is almost a kind of an inner prompting, a desire for something more than the mere world of illusions. And so I think, and we can dig deeper into that, because the parable is so rich. There's so much you can kind of work through. Who's in charge of this thing, and who are the people who are making the signs behind the fire, that are making the images on the wall, and all that. And I think Pasulka does a really good job of drawing attention back to that. But I think one aspect of the parable, of the myth, is that, the reality that we appreciate reality in our state of ignorance is a managed one. In other words, how much of reality, we seek reality, right? We want to live in deep intimacy and contact with reality. Yet, they're really good. The illusion makers are really quite good at this thing, right? I know I'm going to get in trouble, but that
we'll come back to it.
What aspect of what we appreciate as our day-to-day reality is not only being filtered by our own perceptions, but how do you become conscious of the filters that are being placed in front of you that you inherit?
Yeah, I mean, it's the hardest thing,
Yeah.
And, I feel like saying epistemic humility over and over, it has some value in terms of like getting people used to hearing that phrase. What does that mean? Maybe you look it up. The first time somebody said it to me, I was like, "Oh, you're so pompous,"
Well, I'm nothing if not pompous, Steve. I mean,
but the thing is that all it really means, if you want to boil it down to brass tacks, is I have to recognize that I don't know what I don't know. And that if I assume that I do know because somebody else told me something is true, then I open myself to being fooled because I'm not willing to look at things more carefully than that. Because there's a kind of, look, everything, whether you believe in human evolution to a greater or lesser degree, our biological systems, including our psychology, are optimized for efficiency. We stop expending energy everywhere we can because homeostasis is the thing that our body wants, because it's designed to try to keep us alive, right? So like one of the things that, I get in arguments with people, and it's funny because I'm a fat guy, but it's like, I've studied the science of losing weight and I've done it before. And it's like, people will be like, oh, it's calories in, calories out. It's like, no, it's actually not, because that would be, just thermodynamics. But the human system is not a closed system. Hormones regulate where things go and this and that. And so what ends up happening is your body actually has something that's like a thermostat. If I eat 500 fewer calories, my body doesn't say, cool, I'll just burn those. What it says is, oh, we're in a crisis. I'm going to turn down metabolic function.
Yeah, reserve.
And cell regeneration and all this stuff by an equivalent amount of calories. You're going to be hungry, you're going to be cold, you're going to be miserable, and you're still not going to lose weight. I'm going to fight you.
Because I want you to be alive.
Because I want you to be alive. And you turned down the budget. Like most people who live paycheck to paycheck should get this instinctually, right? If $1,000 a month stops coming in, you don't spend at the same level. Like you turn down your spending to match the new budget. It's going to hurt. It's going to be uncomfortable, but it's what you do. And your body does the same thing, right? So human beings are always seeking homeostasis. And the same thing happens with our brains. Like anything we don't have to think about, anything we can simplify, any shortcut we can outsource to somebody else, we do, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of calories you got to burn thinking through all this.
Right, and we have to. Right? I mean, attention, this thing that we do as human beings, is very expensive, right? And so anything that we can do to split the difference, meet it halfway, glide over some things, like we have to do, because we're ultimately trying to reserve energy for the most important things, right? So, therefore, you filter a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But then, what if you have a faulty filter, right? What if, we talk about the inundation of the fire hose of information on X, for instance, right? An easy thing to do would just shut it off, right? Mm-hmm. That's what a lot of people go touch grass, Kale, that kind of thing. It's like, okay, but that's not me. That's not how I roll, because, for a variety of sort of foundational reasons for me that you and I have talked about before, but like I think it matters. I think it matters, not so much for me, I'm an old guy now, but it matters for my kids, both my children, my own children, but also for the kids that I teach, because they're going to inherit the world. Like I live in front of a bunch of kids who are, what are they walking into? And so for me, it's necessary for older folks like myself to pay attention, because I'm trying to guide and mentor the next generation into what is salient and what is not. And the fire hose is a kind of a necessary thing to navigate in order to have some perception, some sense of what I can pass on to them.
Yeah, when they're not walking into your classroom as a blank slate either. They're carrying the weight of the world with them when they come in. And when they go out, you're hoping that you've equipped them with the knowledge and the tools, and the ability, the skill to discern what's real and what's not. And you can't do that if you turn a blind eye to everything that's going on and all the cultural influences. I mean, we talked about this a little in the last episode. I've talked about it on X a few days ago, and people really responded to it. I said, you hear people saying the reason kids today have all these problems is because they've never had it hard. I'm like, no, that's not it at all.
Yeah,
like they've never had to suffer. They've never had to struggle. It's like they may have material comfort in some respects, but they are inundated with existential crises left and right. I mean, they're the ones who had to go through school where everybody's gay because, hey, it's a trend, or everybody's trans. You have to admit that a boy is a girl, and you have to do all these things. And they're the pornification of media, and everybody's got it on their phones, and not feeling like they have a brighter future because, it looks like it's been taken away from them. The jobs are going away. They're hearing that AI is taking everything. They know they can't afford a house probably ever. There's all these things that they're facing. They're real pressures. They may not be as obvious as living through the Great Depression or being shipped off to war, but they're serious and in a way more insidious because they're less overt. Right.
Because even like in the scenario in which, some kids would go shipped off for war, like war's over there, but they live in it. They it's part of the world that they live in from the moment they wake up and pick up their phone, 30 seconds after they wake up. They have to
navigate the fact that everything is online all the time, and their lives are online, and it's so much psychological pressure in so many different directions.
Yeah, we Gen Xers, forget, I think, that we just didn't know anything. I mean, if three of my friends went out on Friday night and I wasn't invited, like, I may have found out a couple of days later, but like, whatever. Like, I was just happy watching Dukes of Hazzard on Friday night with my pizza, where and the kids, we underestimate just how much they know and how much it's just sort of thrust in their face. And I'm not talking about Epstein. I'm not talking about Minnesota. I'm not talking about Trump. I'm not talking about Russia. No. I'm not talking about AI. I'm talking about Jim and Bob and Billy went out without me.
You just, you couldn't just make a phone call from anywhere. Like if you broke down, you didn't have the ability to do that. I had friends my senior year of college who lived with me. One of the guys who lived in the house just never came home one night. Right. We were all freaking out. We thought maybe a drunk driver hit him. We didn't know what happened. And it turned out what happened was he and some other guys had a few, and they tackled the Abdow's big boy statue and put it on the front porch of some girls that they were fond of. And they got caught and charged with a felony because of the value of the statue, and they got put in orange jumpsuits.
Oh, my gosh.
Like that, this whole thing. Now, it worked out. The girl married my friend Paul. So
fantastic.
It
Great
worked.
story.
But I mean, it was just one of those things where it's like, but you don't know what's going on. Like, you're worried, and there's nothing you can check. There's nowhere you can look. There's no text. There's no phone call. You just had to guess.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a different.
So that kind of burden, the sort of the epistemic burden, we might say, the knowledge burden, is real. And so to your point about, saying this the other day on X, it's like, it's not that they don't have it easy. And I think older people have to stop that nonsense right now. They do not have it easy. There are certain things that, like you said, material comfort's fine. We can talk about all day long. But there's a kind of burden that they carry with themselves that, nobody asked them really to shoulder this stuff. Right. Nobody asked them about this stuff, and they carry it. And they carry it again. They can watch everything. Nothing's local anymore. With Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat, nothing is local. They have location services on, so they know where all their friends are all the time. Where they're not, it's a pretty. But here's the thing, though, right? To connect it to the cave, they know more, but how much of what they know is just more illusions spread on the pull down screen?
Well, and I would have to imagine, that it increases mimesis. It increases imitative behavior.
Yeah.
It increases, tribal mentalities without people necessarily stopping and saying, "But is this right?"
Oh,
is
it's
it
totally
true?
It's totally precognitive. I mean, it's totally precognitive.
So, I think that we're drowning in information. We'll call it organic for now, but it's not.
Right.
But then we also have the problem of disinformation, which I wanted to talk about. And I had mentioned last time, this guy. Oh, before I get there.
Yeah.
I did want to touch really quickly because I think it's relevant, especially to people who maybe want to think about it a different way. This theme from Plato's Cave, it's Alice in Wonderland. It's the Matrix.
Yeah.
So it's
right.
It's literally, Morpheus saying, "This is your last chance, Neo. There's no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and you believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes." This is this theme that comes back again and again throughout history of we are constantly being deceived. Do you want to wake up and see the truth, or do you want to stay in the dream? And I think that for people who maybe never get around to reading Plato, it's another way of looking at it. I mean, The Matrix, for all the weirdness that surrounded it, it really was kind of a groundbreaking and paradigm establishing film.
Yeah, so I want to just read real quick. This is what Vervaeke explicitly references. He says, "Remember, these myths," he says, "The Matrix is one of the most frequently cited examples. Remember, these myths remain popular because they are not stories from the past. They are dramatic recreations of the perennial patterns we face as human beings, like the disharmony we experience in the parts of our psyche, the problem of being trapped in illusion and being out of touch with reality. Plato's myth presents a vision of wisdom, freedom from inner conflict, a path of self-transcendence, a fullness of being, and enhanced meaning in life."
I didn't know that he referenced that in that section.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Well, what's interesting about The Matrix, too, that I think they did well, is they showed that coming out of The Matrix into reality made everything harder. And it was like, do you want that? And we talked about the Cypher meme last time. The guy who after being out for a while is like, "This is miserable. Give me the blue pill. I want to go back in."
Yeah.
I just want to go back into the illusion because the illusion was more pleasant.
Right. And so I think it's important to remember, another great Greek, Homer, essentially lays out that the hero is a hero because the hero chooses suffering. Right. What makes Odysseus heroic is not his superpowers, and he was certainly a maximally capable man and mind and all that sort of stuff, but he has a chance to live in the illusion in Circe's island. But he has this sort of inner sense that living in a perpetual vacation with a willing goddess forever and ever is something that is not human. And so for him to embrace his call to go home is ultimately the embrace of suffering. And everybody says, "Odysseus, you can stay here. You don't have to do this. You can, it's going to be hard." And he chooses it anyway. And so I think that there's, and you see this in The Matrix, right? There's a heroism to the call, but make no mistake about it, that heroism is suffering.
Yeah. It's
which is a tough pill. I mean,
the pursuit of the real. I mean, well, look, this film that was made by two brothers has just been listed as one of the top films by female filmmakers because they both transitioned.
Yeah, right.
Like, it's crazy that they made this movie, and it really is, a seminal film.
Yeah.
And yet they didn't get the point, in a way, of their own.
They chose the blue. I mean, right?
They did.
And that's
they chose
ultimately,
the blue.
yeah.
So, but to transition back to the idea of disinformation, because some disinformation, misinformation is one thing. Disinformation is another. I'll get to the distinction here in a second. me go down and actually find that, because I think it's important to start out there. Misinformation is a recognizable lie. Think, we've always been at war with Eurasia.
Right.
Like
1984.
you know that your government is lying to you, but you don't have any power to change it. Or more recently, all those mystery drones flying over New Jersey were actually FAA approved. Like, clearly not. They're harassing military bases. They're doing all this stuff. So misinformation is that. It's identifiable. Yeah, you know what? We're BSing you, and you know it, and we know it, but we have the power to do it.
Right.
And shut up. Disinformation is covert, and it's intended to provide false information through credible sources so that it will be believed. So, for example, back during the Iraq War, the National Museum in Baghdad blamed the American soldiers for allowing the museum to be looted of priceless cultural artifacts. It was a lie. They actually hid all of those things. They just wanted to make the Americans look bad.
Yeah.
But to this day, people remember that story and talk about what a tragedy it was that America did that, right? Because they remember, going back to the last episode, they remember the first impression, because that's the one that counts. Another historical example would be that the British intelligence services actually tricked the Germans into thinking that in 1944, the D-Day invasion was going to happen at Calais.
Right.
And it was actually happening in Normandy.
Yeah.
And so
that's the use of information to deliberately obscure and to fake and to deceive.
Yes, but it is done in a way that it is presented as credible.
Good. Yeah.
If China, I don't know what their, let's say Russia, because Russia Today is like their official propaganda thing, Like, if a story comes out that's damaging to, I don't know, we'll just say Trump for the purposes of this, in Russia Today, you're like, wow, it's Russia Today. Of course they're going to say that. But if the Russians are able to influence somebody to put a story in Fox News, and it's the same disinformation, but now it's through an outlet that the people who would have voted for Trump probably trust.
Yeah.
Now it's much more effective. Their defenses are down. They're open to that information. And so it is a much more effective tool of persuasion than it would be if it was more overt. I mean, you have this throughout history. Just looking, I wrote down a few examples when I was prepping for the show, like the Trojan horse is a great example.
Perfect example, yeah.
Sun Tzu in The Art of War said all warfare is based on deception. Xerxes used false numbers to intimidate Greece. Hannibal used fake troop placements made of straw dummies. There's all this stuff. I actually think one of the most effective pieces of disinformation in history is Marie Antoinette's "Let Them Eat Cake."
That's right. Perfect.
Because it didn't happen.
Didn't happen.
Like, she never actually said it. In fact, it was Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the Enlightenment philosopher who hated the church and the Catholic monarchy, who wrote it in his Confessions. At the time, Marie Antoinette was 9 years old. Like, he wrote the line and he attributed it to a great princess, right?
Yeah.
But later, when they needed to stir up the revolutionary spirit, and the people were starving, which, by the way, they were starving for multiple reasons, none of which were directly the result of King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. There had been crop failures because they went through this little ice age where they had these really cold, it's 1788, they had one of the coldest summers on record. The wheat froze and it died. The revolutionaries were attacking granaries. They were attacking convoys. They were trying to cause disruption. The economics of France were destroyed, not just from their own wars, but because they financed the Revolutionary War in America. There was all this stuff going on. The crown couldn't have done anything, but they made it about their extravagance.
Yeah.
And they used the new technologies of like the printing press and all this stuff. And they said, here's a smear campaign. It'll make all these people are starving because the poor people in France got 80 to 90% of their calories from bread.
From bread. I know.
And so when there was no wheat and they couldn't make bread, like they were literally starving. And it doesn't take much to take starving people and piss them off when you say that's the reason why it's happening.
And people want to blame. I mean, I get it. Yeah.
But I mean, look at we're 300 years later, 200 and some 250 years later, and we still quote "let them eat cake" like it really happened, because that's how effective that is. So I bring this all up in the context of modern disinformation, which was really revolutionized by the Russians. The Ion Pachepa, whose book I mentioned last time, he's now deceased, but he was the highest ranking defector from the Soviet intelligence apparatus. I think he came over here in the 80s or the 90s. But he wrote this book in like 2010. And he said that the Soviets really perfected this, but it started with Potemkin and Catherine the Great.
That's right.
And if people don't know the story, they were lovers, and she was taken on a tour through Crimea, which they had just taken from the Turks. So it was, modern day Ukraine. And he wanted to impress her and to influence her view of the greatness of Russia. So he had these fake villages built so that she could be brought through, and they had an archway put up that said, "This is the gateway to Constantinople," and they made it all look amazing, and it was basically a movie set designed to fool her. And it wasn't done out of malice. It was surprisingly, it was done out of love and out of a sense of, hey, let's have a great attitude about Mother Russia. But it kind of set the stage, and it's where, if you don't know, it's where you get the phrase Potemkin village from.
Yeah.
Anytime somebody fakes something in order to accomplish a rhetorical end, it's a Potemkin village. And so this is kind of where it started. But he said the Soviets perfected it. He said that during the Cold War, there were more people working in the Soviet disinformation machinery than for the Soviet army and defense industry put together.
Wow.
Over 1 million officers and several million informants.
Wow.
And he says that the major condition for disinformation to succeed is that a story should always be built around a kernel of truth. And one of the chief weapons in the KGB Infowar arsenal was called framing, which is when you rewrite the past in order to change the story in the present. And we see this all the time. I mean, this is largely what's behind this rise of both alt-right and far-left anti-Semitism. Like, we're just rewriting the story of World War II, of the Holocaust, of all this stuff.
And the protocols of the Elder Zion, which was right out of Russia. Yep. Amazing.
And so, we are in this paradigm where we are confronted with multiple layers of mis and disinformation, and we are drowning in so much stuff that, like, we're in the cave. Like, how do we get out of the cave?
And what's so curious to me about the image of the cave is that it seems to me that there are layers of caves, right? You could kind of pop out of the cave.
Inception of caves.
Yeah, well, I do. I think this, right? Like you could pop out of one false frame, and you think, oh, okay, finally, like, I'm out of the false frame, and you could just sort of pop in to one, the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one, and it's like, well, which one? And then you realize you've never gone up, you've only just kind of gone lateral, maybe below, but so I think that there are multiple levels to the cave. Just throw that out there.
No, I agree with you. There isn't sort of an objective measure, I don't think, to tell you you're out of the cave. I mean, go back.
It's not objective. Yeah, I'll take that.
Like, go back to the Matrix. After Morpheus pulls Neo out, and they go back in, and he's showing him the ropes. There's the woman in the red dress, right?
Right.
Like, he doesn't realize that she's there as a distraction that's used. Like, he's now aware, the Matrix isn't real. But she's like another layer of distraction that the agents are using, because if that catches his attention, then, yeah, exactly.
That's right. So, no, that's good. That's really good.
So I agree with you that there are multiple layers, and I feel like we encounter that all the time as we're climbing through all this garbage looking for the truth. It makes me think of The Labyrinth was one of my favorite movies as a kid.
Yeah.
And when Sarah has the weird vision, she gets the poisoned apple, and she goes into this trance, and she has this vision that she's dancing with the Goblin King and all this stuff. And then she wakes up in her bed, and she thinks, it was all just a dream, right? But then the door opens, and the weird junk lady comes in.
Yeah, that's right.
And she's like, "Oh, you like your teddy bear, don't you? Yes." Oh, and she's like giving her all this stuff that she's like distracting her with. Like, "Oh, but you like this, you like that." Like, that's the algorithm. That's
right.
exactly what the algorithm is doing.
That's right.
It's constantly throwing stuff in your face. Like, I know you like this. Don't think about the fact that you're actually not in your own house, that you're not where you're supposed to be, that you're not awake from the dream. You're dreaming that you woke up from the dream.
Right.
But
yeah, that's the self-deception. That's both deception and self-deception in a nutshell, right? Which we seem to have an almost infinite capacity for.
So then the question becomes, well, go.
No, I was just saying almost. Notice I left myself a little breadcrumb path out, but go ahead.
What's difficult is, how do you learn to filter for what's real and what's true? And that's the framework that I feel like we need to try to figure out collectively, not just us, everybody who's listening to this.
Yeah.
How do we build a framework that allows us to do that kind of discernment? I find that I have, I wrote this thing the other day. Kids who grow up in dangerous environments, in volatile homes, like in dangerous neighborhoods, like, whatever it is, they learn intuitively through their limbic system to scan for danger. It's not a conscious thing.
Right.
But they develop kind of a sixth sense.
Yeah.
And so, you'll meet somebody and you immediately get a read like, nah, I don't trust that person. Or you're in a situation, you're like, I got a bad feeling about this. Let's get out of it. And it's very difficult to explain, and that'll help you filter. But if you don't have that, it gets really, really tricky. Some of us do it through like ADHD because we just can't pay attention to anything that doesn't feel like it's important.
Yeah.
And we don't know what our brain is doing. We're just cycling. There are competing theories on ADHD. Like Dr. Gabor-Mate says that it's a result of infant trauma, like of being around stressed parents, and you absorb the stress and you begin to dissociate. But I've heard evolutionary theories that say it's basically like, imagine you're in a jungle and you need to see the tiger.
Yeah.
And there's all this visual distraction. There's palm trees and there's flowers and there's bird calls and the monkeys are moving around. Like, you have to see this tiger that's camouflaged.
Mm-hmm.
So your ability to filter all the visual noise and see the predator is potentially where this came from. I don't know what the answer is, but we are in an environment where we are having to look for predators metaphorically all the time.
Right.
How do you sort that out from the background noise? How do you see the forest for the trees? I don't know the answer.
Yeah, I don't either exactly. But, I do think that we have an internal sense that we can get to of resonance, a kind of a deep resonance. And those of us who have been motivated for combat, metaphorically or otherwise, motivated to scan the horizon for threat, I do think that that's part of the baseline of survival. So I accept that. But I think therein lies the motivation to create walled gardens, right? To create, safe spaces. I mean, like literally create safe spaces, to craft an environment so that we can be at home, right? And this is the peculiar evil of domicide. This is the peculiar evil of a home that's not really a home, right? Because if you have nowhere to lay your head, right, to be at rest, then you only know the kind of half second away from catastrophe. Right? And so to me, so foundational, looking for some sort of practice, of finding wisdom and living by wisdom is in part creating shared spaces with which to, lay your sword down, to put your head on the pillow and to sort of be okay, to be at home. And I think the incursion of media, for instance, in our very homes, robs us all things being equal, robs us of the peace that we could, in theory, find inside the four walls of our home.
Yeah, it's weird because we take solace from chaos by pulling out our screens and looking at more chaos, because it's hitting a dopamine button in our brain, like a rat in a maze that just hits the button and it gets the cheese, and it's like it hijacks that system, that reward system, but then you feel terrible. Like, why have I, like, the number of nights that I started because I was like, I just need to wind down, right? And I'm just watching funny videos and sending them to my friends or whatever. And then I'm like, where did the last 3 hours go?
Right.
Because I mean, that's what the perpetual scroll does. It's like we're just constantly like, oh, just one more. Like the next one could be really good. It's FOMO. It's that fear I'm going to miss out if I end it here.
Well, and that's why distraction is such a potent attentional weapon, right? We seek distraction, distracted from distraction by distraction, as Eliot says, yet we know that that's actually not a path to wisdom. Like we do know, even though we gravitate toward it, we know, or do we know it? I don't know. Maybe I'm overstating it. But I think in a sober moment, I know that is distracting me from purpose and meaning.
Yeah.
So that's a tough one.
No, I mean, I think you kind of, it is a guilty pleasure. You have that thought in the back of your mind of, I should be doing something else, but I am so burned out right now. Like, life is so exhausting that this feels good, and I'm just going to keep doing it for a little while longer. I mean, that's the feeling I think that drives everybody to keep doing it.
So I think one practice that you can incorporate, though, right, is that I believe that truth has a kind of resonance. And one way of distinguishing between real truth and false truth is sort of precisely what you're talking about there. Let's say you scroll and all of a sudden 45 minutes goes away, right? And is how I am paying attention to whatever I'm paying attention to. Is it making me a more fully integrated and whole person, or is it disintegrating me? And to learn how to be tuned into that. Am I disintegrating right now, or am I integrating right now? Maybe that's a kind of mnemonic, a device.
How do you identify whether that's happening?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is through other people, right? Mm-hmm. One of the reasons why I always reach out to you is, whatever, I'll like dump, on I'll throw you a text, blah, 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 you're like, you can check me, right? Mm-hmm. I'm sort of throwing that out at you because, like, I have this sort of negative sense, like, oh, like all this stuff is happening. You're like, all right, well, Kale, like da-da-da. And vice versa, right? I mean, that's what friendship is doing, right? It's a way of checking in, like, am I seeing this correctly or not? And you and I think, are pretty good about pushing back against one another's defaults, pushing back against one another's sort of tendencies, etc. But I think that friendship is the answer to that. That this pursuit of wisdom can't be isolated.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that's why I think embedded communities are potentially a salve to the collective sense of depression or something like that.
But they're so far flung. I mean, like, you and I live 12 hours drive apart from one another. We've gotten together when circumstances have allowed it in real life. But I mean, I don't have a single friend that's less than 300 miles away.
Right.
That's just the reality that we live in. And there aren't a lot of contextual opportunities to go meet new people, especially at midlife. Like, everybody's got a lot going on. And And so I think that the friendship is difficult. I think intentional communities usually end up becoming a problem.
They become warped,
they turn into cults, or they turn into whatever. Like, there are organic communities that do exist, but there has to be a gravitational draw. I've watched a lot of family and friends all move into the area of Virginia right around Christendom College because they had kids that went there, or, you know, they had family that were there or whatever. And now there's this huge community of people who all share the same beliefs and get together and do all, and it's cool, but it's like, but it happened organically. Like it didn't happen because everybody's like, let's form a commune, because that doesn't really work.
Yeah.
You know, you wind up with whatever that debacle was out in Texas a couple of years ago.
Exactly.
You know, and I've, you know, I grew up around that. You know, I had family that all moved to a particular area of Connecticut because there was a retreat center there.
Right.
And then it turned out to be a really creepy cult, and the guy who founded it was doing nasty stuff, and it fractured that community. Like, I remember like this, you know, my one friend's mom had a nervous breakdown and started screaming at everybody because she didn't believe the accusations, and it just, you see enough of that over the course of a lifetime, and you're like, man, I don't know how you make it work the right way.
Yeah.
We don't have enough commonalities as a culture for organic communities to easily form. Like what are they? And, you know, if you go to Europe, you think about this a lot because you're like, oh, everybody went to the same church because they were all the same religion. And then the town kind of, you know, grew around that.
Yeah.
And there was a natural locus for everybody, and they more or less shared a worldview and beliefs. And, you know, I mean, I don't want to overhype the benefits of homogeneity, because there is some good to be had in not just exclusively being around people who are just like you. But I just don't know what the right way is. Like, how do you, you know, you can't do trust falls with people you can't trust. So how do you find them in a world that's so fragmented?
Yeah, and like just structurally so, you know, that everything works against the formation of deep human connection. And how can you live a life of integrated wisdom with the necessary practices and liturgies if everyone is pulled unconsciously apart? But we're in the middle of this weird experiment, aren't we, Steve? I mean, this is the world that we all live in. And, you know, social media comes along at the right time, you know, to pour gasoline on that fire. So that, you know, you and I look back at our pre-internet childhoods and, you know, there's a real deep nostalgia for that because we sense that things are not right. And not only are they not right, but they seem to be becoming increasingly not right. None of us feel like we've sort of turned the corner.
Yeah, I mean, and nostalgia is part of sort of the symptom of all this stuff that's going on, because you look back at a simpler time, and it's as much or more about how you felt back then than about what you're going back to. I mean, you know, we're in this weird place because our childhoods are being remade constantly before our eyes. Like, there's a new He-Man movie coming out, live action. You know, I was watching that in the 80s. Like, and it looks like it could be good. I don't know, but it's like I've watched everything I was into as a kid be made again and again as an adult.
Yeah.
And there's this thing inside of me that's screaming, like, why aren't we telling new stories? Like, why are we just going back to the same well again and again and again? Because it's safe.
Yeah.
Like, because we don't want to take risks, because, you know, because there's a comfort in, like, things felt better then, so let's try to bring that back, because everybody, like, I saw something today that said something about, like, we go back to remember who we were so we can try to figure out who we are.
Yeah. That's right. Right, because we feel like something got lost in the transfer of time. You know, I wonder, what do you make of this conversational turn toward nostalgia, and how might you make sense of that in relationship to the myth of the cave? Right?
Well,
I mean, you know what I mean?
I do, because it goes back to the blue pill guy
Yeah.
from the Matrix, right?
Yeah.
He woke up, he came out of the cave, he saw the real world, and he was like, man, I don't like this as much as the illusion. The illusion was easier. It was comfortable. It was familiar. It didn't involve as much hardship. I want to go back. Like, I do feel like there is that aspect of nostalgia says, how do we go back to the thing that made us, and it's not even so much that it made us feel good, because at the time we wouldn't have had the same opinion about it
Absolutely
as
not.
we do now.
Yeah, yeah.
We are looking back with sort of this golden haze of memory saying, man, that was simpler, that was easier, that was fun. You remember when we did this? And there were good things, there really were.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the whole story of
that. Robert Frost has this line in one of my favorite poems called Directive, and he says, back out of all this now, too much for us, back to a time made more simple by the loss of definition. You know, and it's this, like I remember lining up to go see Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and I don't remember whatever was annoying me that day or something my mom said that made me mad or like whatever. Like I don't remember, but I remember like chomping on that popcorn and watching the AT-AT walkers, reveal with the binoculars, and he scales up. You're like, goosh, goosh. I remember like, whoa. Like I remember all of that, but I don't remember all the other stuff. It's more simple, right?
And I think that there's a couple things happening there. One is, memory filters selectively. It's easier to remember really, really good times and really, really bad times than not anything that's in between.
Yeah.
But it's also that, to return to our thesis that we're going to come back to over and over, it's why our theme for this show is the way it is. It's why the trailer is the way it is. The post-war order, this thing that happened in the 1940s that bloomed in the 1950s, it really reached its apex when we were kids. Like there is something to be said for the fact that the 80s was one of the best times to grow up.
Right. And especially after the sort of the temporary malaise of the 70s, right? The late 70s and the economic disruptions there. I actually remember some of that. I actually remember being in a gas line with my mom and dad, trying to get gas in the Cutlass, the Oldsmobile Cutlass. And so the 80s sort of roll around, and it's like, boom, we're like back in business. And, it really was, for a non-political kid, a 10-year-old kid, 10-year-old kid, it really was like, boom, we are back and we're going to kill the commies and we're going to win. It really was all that. Quickly nosedived in the late 80s, but
still.
I mean,
like if you look at all the nostalgic stuff that comes back now, the movies, the shows, a lot of the fashions, the meme accounts that bring up like the old commercials and all this kind of stuff, most of it is 80s. And it's weird because the boomers have the most disposable income, so you would think it would be the 60s, you would think, but there's something about the 80s that was magnetic. And so I do, without knowing how to go all the way down that road, because I don't know where we find ourselves. I mean, Stranger Things, again, it's like, it's the
Perfect.
80s was the thing. For some reason, it was like, that was the turning point where things after that started to get weird.
Well, and of course, in part, this is partly, the part of Francis Fukuyama's thesis that I think is resonant, right? The 80s were the kind of culmination, and with the victory over the Soviet Union, we entered into the end of history, right? And so what do you do now, right? I mean, the end of history, the thesis under-indexed purpose and meaning. The Cold War gave us all the purpose and meaning we could use, right? And when that's gone, well, what now? What's next?
The internet.
Now we're just arguing about where to put the deck chairs, out back.
But the internet is what's next. That's the thing.
Yeah.
89, the Berlin Wall falls, right? It's 91 that the Russia, goes under as the Soviet Union goes away.
Yeah.
And then I had the internet in 1993.
Yeah, I had a little
it
dial-up
was very rudimentary, but I mean, it was, this ISP came to my town. At the time I was living in Binghamton, New York, or just outside of Binghamton, New York.
Yeah.
And I still remember, like, I had to go in to a meeting. I was like 15. I had to go into a meeting at the headquarters of SpectraNet, which was the ISP. That was
I remember
the first
that. Yeah.
And they gave us like Ziploc bags with discs that configured our computer so that we could get online. And I got a certificate saying I was one of the first 200 internet users in my county.
So good. So good.
Like, I wish I still had it because it would be great.
Yeah, it's so good. I know.
But it's like, so that's 93, right? And so the internet moves pretty fast from that point on. It's pretty rudimentary early. But, I was looking into this nostalgia thing, and the internet has flattened the timeline.
Yeah.
And that's something that I don't think we give enough credit to, is everything from all the time that there are records or photos or videos or whatever is all available right now simultaneously on demand. That didn't exist before. So if you want to go back into nostalgia, if you want to, do all that, you can go back. You can go watch the Dukes of Hazzard. You can watch He-Man. You can find it. You can buy it on DVD, or you can stream it, or you can do whatever. Like, there is something about the compression effect that the internet has.
Yeah, I like that.
Time.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's really rich. It's also the internet. Is the internet the cave? Right.
Well, it's becoming.
Yeah, it's becoming the cave. Remember, if you want it to be, the internet could be the cave, right? That's the weird, almost like optionality here. Like you and I, I think, at least I can speak for myself here, I look at the internet as an attempt to find truth, right? I want to, what's going on like that. Yeah. But I could just as easily use the internet as a sort of a fully immersive blue pill environment.
Well, I mean, look at the way the internet has collapsed in on itself. So, in the 90s, in the early 2000s, before social media hit in like 2006, 2007, Facebook was the first. We would go to a million different websites when we were online. Like,
that's right.
That was the way that you found stuff. You would have to go here and you'd have to go there. Like, I open like 4 websites.
Yeah, exactly. I don't. That's right. Only time I open a really outside of my normal, it's like if it's something on X and I click on it, it's know.
But they're all technically social media, and it's like whatever article you're opening, it's like you've just gone into a little alcove that you're just going to come back.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
So I go to Facebook more rarely, but I still have a lot of people I know on there. So I'll do that maybe once a day. X, I'm addicted to because
same.
The FOMO is strong.
Yeah.
I go to Substack. That's pretty much it. Like, I have a couple of aggregator, like, places where I save articles when I want to read them later.
Yeah.
And things like that. But I mean, I'm not going to the Drudge Report and opening 1,500 different.
Remember that? That's so funny.
News websites.
That.
Those aggregators in the past were gateways to lots of other websites, and then those websites had other content. We don't do that anymore. So it feels like a cave, because once you're all corralled into one place, it's a lot easier to throw those shadows on them.
Right, and of course, all the social media platforms are trying to increase time on platform, right? So you increasingly find yourself within different alcoves of that social media platform.
Yeah, because it actually penalizes you for sending traffic off the website to go read an article or whatever. And so if you put up a post that has a link, people don't see it, and so then you're not incentivized to post it. And now, because most platforms are offering creator revenue to people who get lots of views, everybody is being incentivized to do stuff that just grabs attention and provokes emotion and makes people feel mad or nostalgic or sad or whatever, like whatever the strongest emotions are they can evoke, because then they'll share it and more people will look at it, and then the person who made it gets paid, right?
Right.
Which is why I feel like, to go back to the cave and to talk about who are the puppet masters. And it's interesting because Diana Pasulka, when she wrote about it, she said, I read it in college and I didn't think anything of it. It was a philosophical thing, and it was like, I get the allegory. Yeah. She's like, but I went back and looked at it again, and she's like, why doesn't anybody talk about the puppet masters?
Yeah, that's right.
Like, who are these shadowy, cloaked figures that are keeping people confined and throwing illusions at them and keeping them brainwashed, basically? And it's like, I was trying to think that through. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, you've got governments, disinformation.
Yeah.
You've got media, because they're usually tools of governments or of some political agenda and of their sponsors. So then you've got corporations, because they got stuff they want to sell you. And then you got things like interest groups and unions and, whatever, like people who have money and power, lobbyists, who want to steer public behavior in a different direction. But I'm like, but none of those is enough. And then I started thinking about it, and I'm taking my notes, and I was just like, I put in all caps. I'm like, what if the algorithm is the puppet master?
Yeah.
And we created it. We created an egregore that is now ruling over us, and it is the sum total of our own consciousness collectively, and our interests and our likes and our engagement and all that stuff. Like, the more we feed it, the bigger it gets, and the more control it has over us.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Mind Flayer in season 3.
Yeah.
Comprised of all these just massive people that just sort of comprise it. It just uses us for body.
But it's like we have become the fuel for the machine that is controlling us.
Yeah.
And we did it ourselves. It's like a mass consensual hallucination.
Yeah.
And then, because it's a hallucination, we don't remember that we're in the dream anymore. It's actually really creepy.
Yeah, it is.
Because it's like maybe nobody is at the wheel. And it's like, so I don't know if people remember. I want to play a video clip if I can cue it up. But there was this movie that came out on Netflix a couple years ago. It's called Leave the World Behind. And
are we going to get a content strike for this, or?
I don't think so. I'm only going to play a few seconds, so fair use should come in, but we'll see what happens. But what's interesting about it is it was actually produced by the Obamas.
Yeah.
And so it's this apocalyptic story about, I don't think it's ever actually explained why, what happens.
They keep it mute, yeah.
But there's this guy who, he ends up, Julia Roberts has like this house by the beach. I don't know if it's their summer house. I can't remember. I haven't watched it in a couple of years. But anyway, this guy ends up not being able to go anywhere because like systems are failing, like airplanes are crashing out of the sky, all this stuff. So he knocks on the door and is like, hey, can me and my daughter stay here? Because whatever's going on is bad, right? And there's all this distrust, and they of course throw racial sub-themes and all this stuff because the guy's black. But they end up having this conversation at the table because she realizes like he's a government guy. He's a lobbyist or something. He's somebody influential. I can't remember what his role is. And she's like, well, don't they, the powerful people, have influence? Like, can't they tell you what's going on? And that's kind of the lead in to this clip.
Are you thinking that your friend is somehow behind what's happening here?
No, nothing like that. The conspiracy theory about a shadowy group of people in another world is far too lazy of an explanation. Especially when the truth is much scarier.
What is the truth?
No one is in control.
And it kind of goes from there.
Yeah.
But it's like, that line really hit me. Because we always think, oh, there's the shadowy cabal, and they're controlling everything, and there's the deep state, and there's this and that. And it's like, I do think there are factions. I do think there are tribes that have control over things. The deep state is real.
Yeah.
I think whatever the apparatus is behind like the legacy UAP program and keeping those secrets secret, like those are real. The Manhattan Project was real. Like there are real conspiracies that really exist. But if nobody's pulling all the levers,
right?
Stuff's just happening. And it's like, it's this emergent phenomenon that comes out of an interlocking system of different groups and individuals and power plays and all this, but it's like, again, the egregore is it's the best way of looking at it. It's something that emerges from the sum total of all these things.
Yeah, that actually resonates. I of course I love the idea of the egregore, because in some weird woo sort of way, I do think that these are spirits. I do think that there are spirits, and I also think that I like the way you characterize it as sort of a web of vaguely interlocking entities or forces that sometimes work in concert with one another, sometimes work against one another. But the end result is everyone is confounded, right? You know, and so, you know, to go back to, you know, kind of the theme of the show, you know, is that we seek enlightenment, right? We have a desire to live in intimacy to the truth, and you know, there's a kind of moral compulsion to that. Sure, it's curiosity. Sure, I like to know things, but I think that, you know, when you finally are allowed to turn behind you and see that these things that you were seeing on the wall are actually fake,
mm-hmm.
I don't think that you can ever really go back, despite Cypher's choice. Like, I don't. I think that you're forever marked as an oddball. But maybe that's the price you have to pay in the pursuit of integrative, harmonious lover of wisdom.
Well, I mean, as a storyteller, you can't show what happens to Cypher after he eats that steak. Like, that's, you know, the denouement of his
right.
of his story arc. But it's like, show me the next 10 years of his life where he can't forget. And
right.
He knows everything around him is fake. Like, how does that change his behavior? Like, how does that change the way he interacts with other people? Like, does he get fed up and yell at somebody at some point and say, don't you know that none of this is real?
Yeah.
Like, we don't get to see that part of the story because a point was being made.
That's really good. That's really good.
But if you take that to its logical conclusion, you're right. You can't go back. I mean, I don't want to turn this show into this topic, but you know, I very famously, you know, was a Catholic media person who then left the church, right? And I constantly reevaluate that decision, and I constantly reevaluate Catholicism, and literally 99.9% of my friends and family are still Catholic, and so I'm immersed in these themes all the time. And I think frequently, I maybe I'll go back someday. Maybe God will call me. Maybe He'll break through whatever this thing is that I can't see.
Yeah.
But if I go back, I will never go back as the guy I left.
Absolutely, right.
Like, there's just no way I will ever look at any of that stuff the same way. And when I watch my friends making the same arguments I was making 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I'm like, you're stuck. You're stuck in a way of looking at this, and it isn't the end all be all. Like, there's something we're missing.
Yeah.
There's something that we're not getting right.
You know what I think that you see is a lack of growth.
Well, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you know, you see in that it's a substitute. You know, all the arguments and all the backs and forth about document X and scripture Y and Pope G and whatever, all the back and forth, you know, it's like it would be one thing if that led to, I mean, what we would just call holiness, right? Whatever that means, right? If it actually led to a kind of leveling up, it would be different for me.
Right.
But I don't see it. I don't see that at all.
No, it just leads to circular, repetitive arguments about the same things. No progress is made. Nothing is going to change. You wind up, you know, we were talking off air, but I mean, I've talked about this a lot publicly, about getting caught up in the neo-Gnosticism of like Marian apparitions and all that. And why? Because you're looking at something and you're like, it doesn't make sense. It's not supposed to work this way. Something is wrong. Show me something. Show me the playbook. Help me to understand that there's a plan. Help me to understand that God knew that things were going to get this bad, and that and it was supposed to happen so that I don't lose it, because when I'm looking at this, I'm like, I can't find God anywhere.
Yeah.
And so I need to know that, oh, no. This thing where it was supposed to look like it was supposed to look like God was gone. Like that the tomb was empty and that the church wasn't being led. It was supposed to look like that so that I don't think that it only looks like that because it's true.
Yeah. And I think both of us are really sympathetic to scanning the horizon and looking for meaning and looking for things hidden. I think that's a good sign, right? But there's a way in which that can become a sort of substitutionary activity for the real, for a lack of a better way to say it, right? And that I believe that a lot of that can be done in the right spirit. I try to do it myself, but I think it's also important to recognize that much of what passes for public faith is an exercise in tribal justifications.
Yes, 100%.
And
I don't think we do enough of a good job looking for goodness, looking for spiritual fruit, looking for personal fruit. I mean, one of the things that I came to was I was like, this isn't making me a better man.
Right, amen.
Like, why am I not getting better? I'm doing the things, I'm going through the motions, I'm saying the prayers, I'm receiving the sacraments, I'm showing up, and I'm not changing in a way that I want to, and I'm asking for.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about, when Vervaeke talks about integration and disintegration, right? That you can make generative pathways disintegrative if you want, right? If you allow it, right? It can kind of colonize your sense of harmony and wholeness. And all too often, that's exactly what we see. And so I'm left to conclude that it's distraction making more than flourishing making. It's distraction making more than, as you said, making me a better man.
I think it matters to look for, where are the good people and what are they doing? Like, I don't want to just hear what they're saying.
Yeah.
And I don't want to give Father Joe Krupp too big of a head.
No, we cannot do that, Steve. We cannot do that.
But I mean, I lived with the guy for about a month and a half over the past few months, on and off. I stayed at his place a couple times. And like, more than anybody I've ever encountered, this is a guy who just lives like he believes it. But he is somebody who I never could have accepted when I was living within this rule-bound view of the way faith is supposed to operate. Because he doesn't do things the way I thought he was supposed to. But he's a better man than anybody I encountered in that city. Yeah. And he had this line that he would always say. And he would just say, okay, well, what does that have to do with Jesus? Like, that was his thing.
Yeah.
Like, he would ask that question, and he would ask it to his bishop when he would be like, you have to do this because this is the rule. And he'd be like, okay, well, what does that have to do with Jesus?
Right.
This guy would go to war for people, like getting annulments when they clearly like needed the annulment, and the tribunal was tripping them up with administrative bullcrap. And he's like, they're doing everything right. Like, they didn't know what they were doing before, but they do now. And we need to take care of these people.
Right.
He's like, I'll be obedient if it costs me something. But he's like, I'm not going to let it hurt the people that I'm supposed to take care of.
Yeah.
And just everybody who came to him, the generosity of spirit that he showed them. People misunderstand him. Like, I had a bunch of people tell me that, oh, he's so arrogant, blah, blah. I'm like, guys, it's an act.
Exactly.
Like, it's totally, he's playing a character because it's so ridiculous. Yeah. I have never seen someone more solicitous of, like, are you okay? Did I, like, is it all right if we do this? Like, so kind. And so he does his whole thing where he gets on his, like, I'm Father Joseph Krupp and you are not, and and I'm a very reverend, and it's a joke. It's literally just a joke. The guy, like, he's a good man, right? And so having that experience to me, though, brings back that question that I get asked a lot, and people are like, oh, you left the church because of other people? I'm like, no, I didn't. But seeing that the people I was surrounded by were acting in ways that told me that Christianity does them no good certainly didn't help.
Right.
Because these people were devout and they were assholes. You know, and it's like, I don't want to be told that like this thing that you can ideologically argue for, you know, is the solution to everything, but it doesn't make you into a decent person. Like, that's a problem for me.
Right, and this gets into what some of my other friends, online friends, you know, people talk about propositional tyranny. You know, the world in which you inhabited was absolutely obsessed with propositional truth and were complete, I'm going to use this word technically, were retarded in terms of their formations as persons, right? Like to retard as in to not flourish, as in to stick, as to stay and to be stuck and stay, right? You know, and that, like, that matters. That absolutely, you know, like I said before, you know, cite all your documents, cite all your scriptures, but if you're an asshole, it's not true, right? Now, look, we're adults. You can recognize human weaknesses, and, you know, that's why, you know, you don't leave because, you know, somebody's an asshole, but it sure as heck doesn't help.
No, it doesn't help.
You know?
And to return to one of our earlier themes in this episode, and one of the ones we'll come back to a lot, you cannot have epistemic humility if you outsource 80% of your reasoning capability to dogmatic propositions. Like, I understand that it's a dogmatic religion, but when your only argument is the church says, and you can't tell me, okay, but why? Why does that work? Why is it good? Where is the evidence that this is, you know, makes sense? You can't question it yourself. You can't stop and look at it and go, I don't know why. Like, why do I think that? You know, or if you say, you know, one of my, you know, this is my big hobby horse, but it's like, oh, all aliens, like any UFOs, they're demons. They're just demons.
Right.
And it's like, why don't you evaluate the evidence and then update your worldview accordingly? Like, if they're demons, cool, then you were right.
Right.
But don't, you know, use an a priori dismissal of something you won't even look at because it challenges your soteriology or whatever. And then just decide ahead of time, I know that this can't be anything other than a deception.
Right. I'm worried about those people the most, to be honest with you.
Because they approach everything that way. That's not the only, that's just like you're getting that interface because you post an article. It's like, oh, yeah, a fighter pilot was chasing a UFO. And it's like, oh, that's demons. I'm like, I'm pretty sure demons don't engage with fighter pilots, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. I think they could. I actually think they could. But anyway,
But the point is like, if that is the way you approach any new information, that's not, you know, going back to what we talked about last episode about we filter based on our identity, our brain does it automatically. If we have deeply held beliefs about who we are and what reality is, we will discard anything that challenges that.
Right, and I would just
limits us.
Oh, 100%. I would just remind everyone, if we haven't already alienated them, but, you know, that before Thomas Aquinas rolls around, the Western Church greeted the influx of Aristotle as pure heresy and, you know, a priori false until Thomas comes around and renders a synthesis, a very impressive synthesis, I should point out. And it went back and forth a few years after he died. He was condemned for a little bit, and, you know, then he was a good again, and then they condemned him again. But finally, of course, as we all know, he was ascended. But the synthesis that he cobbles together should serve as a model for us in terms of how we incorporate new things to us, however you want to characterize that. And if you simply dismiss everything out of hand because you can't see how it might integrate into a better whole, a better unity, then maybe it's a you problem, not the phenomenon. So I would urge everyone to be as open-minded as Thomas Aquinas.
Yeah. look at what you can and take the good from it, and discard the bad. I mean, that is an essential aspect of seeking truth.
Right. And there's no wisdom if you're not willing to do that. And then you're going to continue to live in the desert. It's a tough place.
I think we've taken this horse about as far as it can go.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, so we'll do some more with this cave business, because as we said at the top of the show, we don't want this to be something we just react to every news article that pops up and we're just sort of chattering about the news of the day. I think both of us are motivated to try to get into that deeper space, right?
Yeah, I mean, we want to establish a framework of like how do we approach the challenges that we face as truth seekers? Like, what do we need to do? Like, how do we navigate this? And I would like to invite people, by the way, like, send us comments.
Yeah.
Tell us, if there's something you'd like to hear us talk about. I can't promise we're going to get to all of it, but I mean, we're very interested in knowing what you would like to hear.
Yeah, indeed. Because I don't think we have an option to shut our eyes. I don't think we have an option to close off our ears. I think we have to pay attention because, to the theme of the show, looking for signal amidst the noise is even more important now as we, wake up from the nap. That this post-war consensus is teetering on the edge. So,
yeah, because everything's changing, and it's more important than ever to have your bearings.
Amen. All right,
man. Get better. Talk to you soon.
Be well, brother. Be well. Thanks.
Bye.